Welcome. How are we doing? I congratulate you for coming tonight because I know you didn't want to come. You'd rather stay home and not come into this room. But for the next 25, 30 minutes, I'm going to talk to you about your score sheet, what your expectations can be, the new uniform bar exam, and a proposal for what you want to do going forward. First of all, you're not alone. Almost 2,500 failing notices went out this past week, and it wasn't fun to get those notices. If you take those 24 and change, add them to over 4,000 from this summer, we have 6,000 failing notices, 6,500 failing notices in the last two administrations. All right? So what are we going to do? I think what you have to recognize that on the next bar exam, you have to conquer the fear factor. And the fear factor is that you think you have it under control, and all of a sudden it sneaks up on you, and you say, what if I fail again? Or what if I fail another 2 times? Right? What am I going to tell my family? What am I going to tell my friends? What am I going to tell my colleagues at law school? All right? How do we conquer the fear factor? We're going to work inordinately hard, all right? Even harder than you did this summer. Now, if you would, take your score sheet that you have and take that little blue sheet that we gave you when you came in. Now, first thing I want you to look at is the scaled score on the left-hand side, just below your name and your seat number. All right, it lists the 5 essays, and it has the MPT. Now, how did you do on those essays? Now, on the back, it gives you a rough idea of what those numbers are. If you turn it over, it says from 0 to 20. Believe it or not, you can get points for nothing. Now, what did we do? The bar examiners used to release the scores. They'd give you a raw score, and then we'd look at that. Based on what the scores used to be, a score from 1 to up to 20 was 0. Up to 25, a 1, 35, a 2, up to 40, a 3, up to 45, a 4, up to 50, a 5. Now, that's what we're looking for, an average of 5, just so the essays do not hurt you. 55 was a 6, up to 60, a 7, up to 65, an 8, 70, a 9, up to 75, a 10. I rarely, in my 40 years of 40, it's almost 45 now, of doing this, I rarely see a 10. Right? It just doesn't come along. Now, what do we look at? The written average. Now, look at the average. Next to your average, put down 51.5. A 51.5 would have gotten you, all right, 50% of 655. So if you drop down and go over to the right, it says weighted score. Now, we're just at the scale score. If you go to the weighted score, first one you have is your written average. Put next to that 332.5. All right, that's what you were shooting for, so the written average did not hurt you. Below that, the New York multiple choice on the weighted score on the right-hand side, put down 66.5. All right, the multiple choice were worth 10% of your grade. 10% of 665, the passing score would be 66.5. And then drop down to the multi-state. All right, what you were looking there is a 266. All right, and that's simply 40% of 665. If you add those 3 scores together, all right, you would come up with 665. Now, John, I didn't get 55.5. I got a 46.5. How much do I have to go to get to where I want to go? For every point you were below 51.5. All right, if you're 46.5, you're 5 points away. All right, for each point you lift your essay, your written average, you're going to get 6 points over on your weighted score. So that means if you're 5 points away, you weren't 51.5, you were 46.5. To get to where you want to go, you need 5 more points. If you get those 5 points, multiply the points times 6, that's going to give you 30 more points, that's going to carry the day. Now, as far as the New York multiple choice, you needed 66.5. Now, this is explained on the back, all right? So don't feel you have to take notes, all right? It's explained just below the scale score. Now, multiple choice. For every multiple choice question you get right, you're going to get approximately 1.5 more points toward your weighted score. So if you didn't get 66.5, you got 61.5, all right? All right? For each multiple choice question you get right, all right, add 1.5 to the right-hand side. Now, on MBE, in order to get a 266, you needed approximately 132 score. Now, to the extent you didn't get there, all right, and let's say instead of a 266, you were a 254. That means if you take 266 and you subtract 254, you need 12 points. All right? How do you get those 2 points? For every multiple choice question you increase, it's going to be 2 more points toward the weighted score. So you're going to need, for a 2, argument's sake, a 254, you're going to need, all right, that's 12 points, 6 more multi-state questions to go. Now, going back to the essays, all right, I'm going to surprise you because many of you, when you walked out of the exam in July, you said, I killed my essay on criminal law. I killed my essay on joint and several liability in the automobile accident. I'm going to surprise you because many times, all right, when I tell you what these essays were, and you've forgotten the order in which they came, the one you thought you killed, you didn't do as well. The one you thought killed you, you did pretty well. So here's what we have. Essay number 1 was equitable distribution involving marital and separate property, covenants, landlord-tenant, covenants in a lease that run with the land if the lease is assigned. Essay number 2, crim law, conspiracy, arson, facilitation, and renunciation of the crime. All right? Criminal law was number 2. Number 3, corporations and contracts. Corporations, interested director, and whether the corporate veil protects corporate personnel from their own tortious liability, which it doesn't, but that's what they were looking for. They also had a requirements contract, UCC Article 2, a requirements contract, and they had, those of you who took PEPR before, are mnemonic caps, damages. Essay number 4, we had a car accident involving someone who was from out of state, conflict of law. We had joint and several liability, Article 16 of the CPLR. Remember, when you're dealing with car accidents, all right, we don't apply the limitation that Article 16 gives us for joint and several liability. There is full common law, joint and several liability for an automobile accident. All right. Also, there was possibly no fault insurance. Essay number 5, a revocable lifetime trust. All right. We had a will, incorporation by reference. We had a power of attorney, and whether the son could sell his father's comic book collection, even though his father had dementia. And what they were looking for you to discuss is a durable power of attorney that's not revoked for incompetency. We also, in that essay number 5, had an issue of adoption in the will, whether a child, a class gift, an adopted child, either out or in. If he's adopted out of the family, can't take under the will. If he's adopted into that family, he takes under the will. MPT, most people felt, was pretty straightforward. All right? It involved labor law, 2 cases, and some statutes to interpret. Now, let's go back and look at your score sheet. And I'm going to ask you a couple of things. How did you do on the written average? How did you do on the multi-state? How did you do, all right, on that MPT, that 6th score down in a row? All right? And your scores might be consistent, either good or bad, all right? But many people have variations. And I'll tell you how the variations can come about. All right? And this is simply a warning to you. Many people, if they fail the bar, it's because of one of the three. And what they do is they focus in on the essays, or because multi-state hurt them, they focus in on multi-state. And they do hundreds and hundreds of questions on multi-state. And they lift their multi-state score, but then the essay score drops. You have to be like a juggler, throwing 3 balls up in the air. All right? The MPT, the essays, and the MBE. All right? So all 3 you have to do. Now, looking at that, saying to yourself, I did well on this, but I didn't do so well at that. Well, going forward, where do we go? First of all, we recognize the new beast, all right? The UBE. If you did poorly on multi-state, on this exam in February, recognize that this new exam is increasing the weight of the multi-state exam by 25%. It's going from 40% of your grade to 50% of your grade. All right? Now, looking at the MPT, all right? How did you do on the MPT? If you didn't do well, be warned. All right? The MPT is going to be doubled in its weight. Instead of having 1 MPT, you're going to have 2. Now, if you did well, that's a positive. All right? Now, how about the essays? All right? John, I did well on the essays. Recognize that the essays are going from 40% of your grade down to 30% of your grade. And they're not going to test on New York law anymore. It's going to be UBE law, restatement of contract, the Uniform Probate Code, all right? Restatement of torts. And if you look at those essays, and they'll be in our book, the graders' answers as well, what they frequently want you to do is talk about both positions, all right? The majority position, the minority position. So even though, and I think it's going to be easier, all right? This summer, you're not going to have to fight with multi-state law versus New York law. And you know, in my old books, we had 90 pages side by side of the comparisons between multi-state and New York. We won't have to do that anymore. All right? So when we're doing Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, I will not mention the CPLR. When we come to contracts, I am not going to mention the General Obligations Law. I'm not going to mention the New York exceptions because they won't be tested on our bar anymore. All right? But I will talk to you about, all right, the different positions in the UBE subject where there are majority and minority positions. So when we come to wills, all right, most states recognized incorporation by reference that New York didn't recognize. All right? We didn't allow it. But most states do recognize it. And we'll see some of the little variations. All right? The Uniform Probate Code allows you to incorporate by reference, all right, a document that was executed after the will was executed. All right? That's the minority position. Usually the document has to be in existence when the will is executed. But those little things. But I think overall it's going to be easier for you to master multi-state subjects and UBE subjects without having to incorporate, all right, the New York law and having to juggle New York law. Now, question is, where do we go from here? All right? Now, recognize what a 665 is. I talked to a lady earlier who came into the room. She is 2 points away from 665. All right? And I said to her right away, you know what that is on our score sheet? 1 multi-state question. For every multi-state question, you increase your score, all right, you're getting 2 points toward the weighted score. All right? She's very close. Now, I would say to her, in this room, you have the best chance of passing. But I've also talked to people where they're 90 points away. They're 80 points away. All right? If you bring me your score sheet after tonight's lecture, Troy will be here, Damien will be here, and we sit down and talk to you about your score sheet. I'm going to tell you very candidly, it is very rare that I see someone lift their score 80 points. If you've taken the bar exam a couple of times and you've got a couple of score sheets and you come up to me and you say, John, I didn't pass, but I raised my score 40 more points for my weighted score toward the 665. I'm going to give you a hug. That is tremendous. That is absolutely tremendous. But it is very rare that I see someone lift their score 70, 80, 90 points. So I would have to tell you, looking at your score sheet, that to be very candid with you, you might have to be dealing with 2 more times taking that bar exam to pass. But there are exceptions. Exception. Last time I gave this lecture for the July bar, there was a lady who, and I stood up and I told the class, she came up afterwards and she had raised her score, didn't pass, but raised her score 88 points. Phenomenal. All right? Now, who's going to pass? Who's not going to pass? I'm going to tell you very candidly. On last July's exam, the pass rate for repeaters, all right, I got this from the Bar Examiners, the National Conference of Bar Examiners Mass. It's called the Bar Examiner, their publication. Last summer, in the state of New York, the pass rate for people who were not taking it for the first time, pass rate 27%. All right? That means that 73% last summer who were repeating failed the bar exam. All right? Now, I don't want you to get discouraged. Don't get discouraged. That's not the purpose. All right? But we have to deal with reality. All right? So how are we going to get prepared for the exam? First response, John, last winter I took off. I didn't have to work. I now have to work. I have to pay my rent. Nobody's paying my rent. I have to work. All right? I think a person who does not have to work has a better chance of passing the bar. Now, we have a couple of options to prepare for the bar. A full bar course. I am strongly in favor of taking, again, a full bar course. Take Barbary, take Kaplan, take me, but take a full bar course. I think, all right, that's a full program in which you're working out every single day under a trainer. All right? But, John, I can't do it. Couple of options. Troy has a concentrated weekend class. It meets 7 Sundays or Saturdays. I think there's 1 Saturday and 7 Sundays. He does a multi-state subject. All right? It goes all day. It goes from 9 in the morning till 5:30 at night. All right? In that program, he covers a multi-state subject, and he covers 1 or 2 of the UBE subjects. He also has you do in class and for homework, all right, MPTs, hand in essays, do essays in class and hand them in. All right? So that's a possibility. Who is that program for? That program is someone who barely missed passing. 10 points away, 20 points away, maximum, I think, 30 points away. All right? Is someone who can't work, all right, can't give up their job, but can work on the weekends. I think that might be a consideration. Number 2, tutors. Now, tutors are expensive. You're talking probably about, all right, $300 to $400 an hour, 2-hour sessions for 13 or 14 weeks. That's roughly $5,000. A lot of money. But if I said to you, can you run? You said, no, John. All right? If you can run a marathon this fall, I'll give you $25,000. You'd start training. All right? You'd hire a trainer, and you'd train for that marathon because it's worth it to you. You pass the bar this July, and you get the results in October, it's going to be worth more than $25,000 to you economically. All right? So I think tutors, I think, are excellent. I've seen what Damien has done. I've seen what Troy has done. All right? They have done wonderful things for people preparing for the bar exam. So I think if you can afford it, that is another consideration. Now, if you look at your score sheet and you come up to me and you said, John, I'm 5 points over what I needed for the multi-state. I'm 5 points over what I needed, all right, for the New York multiple choice. 5 points over what I needed, all right, to do, all right, the multi-state exam. I killed it. No, you didn't kill it. You just got over a D. And that's what the passing score is, a D. So don't tell me you killed a score. If you come up to me, all right, and your essay average, all right, is not what we needed here, all right, the 332, but you're up at 352, now you're doing well. You're talking about 6s or 7s. Now you're doing well. So I think we have to look at this realistically. And my recommendation, most importantly, I would consider taking a bar course, all right? Full bar course, not cutting any corners, all right? Full bar course. I think it's going to help you immensely. And I'm not, if you've got another course somewhere else that you can get for free, go there. But I think take a full program. I think that's going to prepare you best for this summer. Now, I want you to order your essays, right? You get 5 essays and your MPT. They'll be online, but they usually don't go online for the New York State Bar Examiners until the end of June. I would recommend you pay the money and get the essays, the questions, right, there. They're also going to give you 2 model answers for each of the essays in the MPT that were released by the bar examiners that they found above average. Now, you can hire people that work for us to go over your essays and advise you. But I think you can also do that very well with 4 simple symbols. First symbol, just put down a plus, a minus, a 0, or an X. And when you get your papers back with the questions, sit down and read the first essay. Or sit down, for example, read the second essay on criminal law, conspiracy and arson and renunciation and facilitation. All right? Read the question and then read the 2 model answers that they found above average. Then take your paper and start to read it. If you got wrong law, you just put down the wrong law, put an X. If you didn't put the issue down at all, put a 0. If you developed it, but not as fully as the model answers did, put a minus. All right? And if you read your paper on an issue, and you did as well, you think, as the released model answers, put a plus. I think going through all 5 essays, all right, and the MPT, you may see a pattern developed. A lot of X's, meaning you don't know the law as well as you might have thought you did. All right? 0s, that means you may know the law, but you're not spotting the issues. Minus, you know the law, but you're not developing it as fully as the bar examiners wanted you to do so. All right? And I think there you can do a little self-critique. You can give it to a friend who was on law review with you in law school. They could probably read the essays. All right? You can hire someone on our staff to do it, and you can do it just, I think, as effectively by doing it yourself. So, what are we going to do? We have to re-register for the bar exam. Number 2, all right, we have to decide where we're going this summer. And I don't think it's a bad idea. Talk to people you respect, someone in your family, someone where you're working, all right, and see what your options might be. All right? 3, decide what you're going to do. Am I going to take a full bar course? Talk to your employers. If you work in a law firm, there's a good possibility that some of your employers are former Pieper students. Tell your employer that you talked to John Pieper tonight. You're talking to me right now. And John Pieper recommended that you take as much time off from your job as you possibly can. All right? If your employer will give you half days, if they will give you a couple of days off a week, all right? A Friday and a Monday, oh, is that going to make a difference? Will they give you time in July? Recommendation, the whole month of July. All right, use up your vacation pay. All right, promise your employer you'll come back and do it. But I think the most important thing in your life right now is to pass the bar exam 3 months from right now. Just go in, get it behind you, and it's going to make a tremendous difference in your life. But you have to give yourself a fair chance against the odds you're facing. For those people who are 50, 70, 90 points away, that you've got a task, all right? You've got to consider, I've got to make up a lot of ground, I've got to really work, I've got to take a full program, if you can. Alternatively, Troy's concentrated weekend classes, 7 weekend classes, 9 in the morning till about 5:30 at night. That's an alternative, but usually the people that want to consider that are relatively close to passing, all right? That's an option. Tutors, all right? Call the office, right? See about tutors, Troy or Damien. Talk to them, right? And consider taking a tutor. If you talk to people that have taken tutors, I used to tutor. I don't have the time anymore because I'm doing so much teaching. But I felt that tutoring was the best pedagogically for a student because you had to address weaknesses that you had, not a group weakness, all right, what we think people are suffering from a weakness, but what you, the individual, come in. And you can say to a tutor, and that's frequently what happens with Troy and Damien, I have 10 questions I want to discuss with you on contracts. I want you to grade my essay that you gave me on contracts. A tutor contours, all right, those 2 hours to what you need at that time, whether it's criminal law or real property or MPTs or otherwise. All right, so we're going to consider those. Now, Troy and Damien and I will be here until you're done. All right, so if you want to stay, Troy will be in.